Will teams be reluctant to give out second contracts to receivers? We're going to dive into some guys who are looking for contracts, some 2020 guys who are going to be coming up on getting a contract, and some prospects from 2023 class who are going to be trying to rob some of these guys of an opportunity to get a contract. All that and more right here on Locked On NFL Draft. Let's go.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of the Locked On NFL Draft Show. I am your host, former NFL and AFL defensive back, Eric Crocker, and I got my guy, John Harris, with me today, filling in for my co-host that y'all usually see here, Ryan Tracy. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day, and want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Blue Nile. Make your moment sparkle with the jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On NFL Draft listeners get $50 off of purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. All right, use promo code Locked On at checkout. John Harris, get to dive into some receivers today. I always love talking about receivers, defensive back, of course. And,
yeah,
just the topic of these receivers right now, and how willing are teams going to be to give out these second contracts as receivers get more and more expensive? We're seeing that, right? When you got receivers now, and I was listening to a podcast on a jog this morning. It was Tyreek Hill. He has a new podcast that's out, and I was, let me hear what he has to say about this quarterback situation, right? Between Tua and Patrick Mahomes and everything. I wanted to get more context to it. But one thing was made very clear. He had his agent on that first episode, which I believe it was Drew Rosenhaus.
Yes.
And he talked about how Tyreek Hill is the highest paid non-quarterback. Now, we also know that some of this is skewed a little bit because he has like a $40 million over like the last year, which he probably won't touch that. And that kind of makes his yearly amount fluctuate a little bit, go up.
Right.
And so he probably won't see that. But just being able to say that out loud, that the highest paid non-quarterback, and receivers are going to start looking for that. They're going to want to be the highest paid non-quarterback, where teams are going to prioritize other positions like defensive ends, maybe cornerbacks, right? We're starting to see them get paid a little bit more. But receivers, they're having to pay a premium, but it might be one of those positions where you can kind of replace some of these guys. Now, unless we're talking about Devontae Adams, what he's been over the last few years, DeAndre Hopkins, you saw him with the Texans and how hard it's been to replace him. There's definitely that. But just in the sense of production, you got Deebo Samuel. You got A.J. Brown, who did just get paid, who Houston Texans was like, we don't want to pay you. We're going to do away with you, trade you away for a first-round pick, and draft a guy like, Treylon Burks to kind of fill in. Hollywood Brown, another guy where his situation a little different. You have the Baltimore Ravens, who he was kind of disgruntled with his usage and wanted more. So they were able to get a first-round pick for him, and now they're kind of down the weapon. We'll see what they end up doing, trying to add to that receiver position. But do you think that there's going to be a trend of teams not necessarily want to fork out a ton of money to receivers that they feel like, I think we can get some of this production from a draft pick and get a guy on a rookie contract?
Absolutely. And Eric, it's the team that you mentioned that maybe not a lot of people think about is the one that I think about in this situation. It's the Baltimore Ravens. And I bring up the Ravens because I read this article. I think it was Bucky Brooks who wrote about this in NFL.com. And he mentioned the possibility, and he threw this out there, and he's like, look, I don't think the Ravens will do this. But what if the Ravens, because of the offense that they run, look at the quarterback position as like a college player? And that is, guys there 4 or 5 years, and then he, quote unquote, air quotes, graduates from the Ravens and goes to another location. And he was talking about Lamar Jackson. Like, look, Lamar runs the ball a lot. It's an offense that you don't see a lot in the league. But you have a lot of quarterbacks that could maybe fill in that role that are coming from college. Maybe some that aren't as, seen as first, second, third round picks, but they could fit this offense pretty well. So Lamar would graduate and not get a second contract. So you have 4 years. He graduates off to another team. The Ravens go get a young quarterback, and they recycle. Now, as I read that, I remember thinking, boy, it's kind of an interesting concept. But I don't think it would work at quarterback. I don't. But then this offseason hit, and it got me thinking about receivers because you're seeing that same sort of philosophy. And that is, and I take the Titans. You mentioned A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown scared me every time I saw him on the field. Scared me. I just, when we played him, we had nobody cover him. We had nobody account for him. We had nobody as physical as him. We had nobody who could run with him. And he just embarrassed us all the time. And the only time he didn't have a great game against us was because Desmond King put his helmet in his ribs on the sideline, and he missed the second half of a game that we beat them in the rain last year. That was it. But every time A.J. Brown was on the field, man, I was scared to death of him. But the Titans looked at it and said, he wants a new contract. He wants new money. Well, we've got money, and we're going to have to pay Jeffrey Simmons at a priority position on the defensive line. We're already paying Ryan Tannehill to where Ryan's got the number one cap hit in the league in 2022 is Ryan Tannehill. And I guarantee you nobody would have come up with that. So they've got the quarterback. Derrick Henry obviously is getting paid. Bayard's getting paid. So they've got a lot of money invested in a lot of quote-unquote priority positions. And so now here comes the guy in A.J. Brown after 3 years saying, pay me. Now, there are a lot of people out there that would say, well, yeah, pay the man. But then it comes down to like simple economics, really. There's supply and demand. And that is, look at these receivers that are coming from college. Think about these receivers that came in 2021, came in 2022, and that are coming in 2023. They're plentiful. There are hundreds of them out there. And as former defensive backs, the two of us, we look at receivers and go, But it's hard to argue with the fact that every team is playing 3 and 4 wide receivers. Receivers are being developed that much more in high school and in college. And so I can see teams looking at a receiver going, it's time for you to graduate. We like it. Thank you. We'll take that first-round pick, and we'll go get another receiver. And I mean, the Titans did just that. They were like, goodbye, A.J. Brown. Hello, new A.J. Brown, when they drafted Treylon Burks. Now, I'm in the studio going crazy, like, thank God he's gone, that A.J. Brown is no longer a Titan. And hopefully that's going to be their philosophy. And the flip side of that is, well, what if he's really, really good? Well, if I'm a team, I sit there and go, I got all these guys coming from the college, right? And they're all stepping in and doing a pretty good job right away. So I'm going to pay you 30% less than maybe what the market tells you can get. You want to take that team-friendly deal or not? Heck, no, I'm not taking it. Okay, we just traded you for a first-rounder. We're going to go use that to draft this other guy, and we'll pay him on a first-round rate for 4 years, and we'll do the same thing. And if he wants to graduate somewhere else, we'll let him graduate, and then we'll sit and we'll draft another one at that point because there are so many wide receivers out there. It's not a one-year deal. We've seen him in 2020, the Justin Jefferson crew. We saw him in 21 come in. I mean, all over the place, Jamar Chase, et cetera. We saw him come in this group. I mean, Eric, remember on draft night, there was that run where teams were trading in, and all of a sudden 11, 12, 13, 16.
I think it was 10, 11, 12 were all receivers. And then another one a few picks later I believe it was Washington drafting Dotson.
Yeah, Jahan Dotson at 16. So teams are like, we'll just draft one. We'll get him on a controlled rate for 4 years and then move on. But when that receiver says to us, you know what, I'll take that deal. I'll take that team-friendly deal. Those are the ones that end up getting the second contracts. Now, whether that is going to happen at the receiver position, Eric, we know full well that receivers aren't likely to take lesser than market value. We know how receivers are. So my thought is that the future is going to be more and more teams that look at a receiver as a 4-year commodity or 3 or 4 year commodity, and that's it. And it's time to graduate and go somewhere else where a team has got cap room and willing to pay or restructure a deal, and that team will just replace it with a wide receiver they draft, and away you go. And I think receiver is that position where you can do it. The quarterback, where that theory was sort of brought up that I read, I don't think it works. I think it's, I don't know. I buy it. Wide receiver, though, I completely and totally buy it because of the glut of receivers coming. I think it's happened for running backs, but there just aren't that many running backs coming into the NFL where you go, okay, we're just going to jettison this one and go to the next one. But that philosophy is sort of there. I think it's going to happen with wide receivers too. They're going to be these big free agent signings elsewhere as a wide receiver graduates and moves on to his new team, and the new team says, or the old team says, "Oh, we'll just draft one. We'll be okay." And it'll that perpetual cycle will continue as long as the colleges keep putting all these stud receivers into the draft.
You touched on a little bit of the Treylon Burks situation, trading away A.J. Brown. What does Treylon Burks have to do for that trade to be a success? Because obviously we see Justin Jefferson situation, right? Trading Stephon Diggs, drafting Justin Jefferson. And that's the absolute 100% best case scenario. They probably weren't even expecting that, right? No, who could have a receiver catch for over 3,000 yards in his first 2 seasons in the NFL? So I don't think that has to be the expectations. But what would you consider a success in that trade in the sense of Treylon Burks and the production he has to have?
As far as a particular number, I don't know if there's a particular number, but I know the pressure on Treylon Burks to match the numbers of A.J. Brown, because you know how fans can be. Hey, A.J. won the second round. You're in the first round. You should be doing more than A.J. Brown. Well, A.J. Brown had talent enough to go in the first round. I don't know why he didn't. I don't know if there were questions about his speed or not, but I think Treylon's got to prove that he's the guy that A.J. was in big situations. In tough situations, can Ryan Tannehill depend on him to go get open? I think that would mean 70 to 75 catches, double-digit touchdown years. And the fans in Tennessee are going to want that and going to want that right away, as long as Robert Woods isn't giving that to him. If Robert Woods is giving it to him, if Robert Woods is 80 catches a year, 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns, I think fans can soothe themselves and say, Treylon will come around. But if Woods isn't that guy, and all of a sudden Treylon's struggling to give them that production, I think the pressure will go on him immediately. Eric, we talked about this a little bit with number one overall picks. Number one overall picks, they go there for a reason, but number one overall picks have an immense amount of pressure. And I think that also goes to first-round picks, especially when first-round picks are replacing a guy that's been ultra-productive like A.J. Brown. I think the pressure of replacing A.J. Brown is going to be immense on Treylon Burks. Now, I think we're both Burks fans. I think Burks can do it, but it may not happen in year one. A.J. really, it wasn't until the second half of his rookie year where it sort of clicked. But I think the pressure is going to be there for Treylon Burks. But if he can produce a few things early on, maybe have a big catch against a team and it leads to a win, I think that'll buy him some time. But eventually he's got to replace those numbers of A.J. Brown, or at least be in the vicinity, or they're going to think that that trade was not actually worth it. But to compare it, the fans are going to have, like you said, Diggs and Jefferson. I don't think the Minnesota Vikings fans look back and think, oh, yeah, we traded Stephon Diggs. Well, I'll tell you where you look back and you look at the trade of DeAndre Hopkins is right here, because we didn't get Justin Jefferson. We had an opportunity to pick a second rounder, and then we got David Johnson. And so the trade just looked awful because we couldn't replace that. Now, what if we had gotten Jonathan Taylor? Okay. That's a running back, not a wide receiver. But I think fans would have been like, okay, decent trade. I don't think the Bills or Vikings fans look at that as a bad trade at all. Bills got what they want. Vikings got a replacement of Justin Jefferson. And the Vikings may have to do that when Justin Jefferson comes up here pretty soon as a guy from 2020. His contract's going to become an issue very, very soon. And the Vikings are going to be in that same position the Titans were in coming up this offseason.
So let's talk about that. Let's get into that 2020 class and some of these receivers who are going to be looking for contracts after the season, and how does that have a snowball effect on the 2023 class of receivers coming out. But first, we want to talk to you a little bit about our good folks over at BlueNile.com. And you can head over there right now and you can celebrate all of life's special moments, from creating the custom engagement ring of her dreams to gifting a classic and timeless jewelry piece, all at the price that you won't find at your traditional jeweler. All right, whether you are ready to pop that big question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of being able to shop online at BlueNile.com. Build the engagement ring of her dreams or celebrate life's special moments with the fine jewelry. No matter what you're looking for, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7. Make your moment sparkle with the jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On NFL Draft listeners get $50 off of purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. Use the promo code Locked On. Again, use promo code Locked On. And plus, we got to make sure that we let you know every order is insured. It ships free and it arrives in discreet packaging, so your special woman will know what is inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. We want to let you know there's something that's going on right now. It's the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft, and it has already started. It just started on June 16th with over 50 insiders. Nothing equals the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft. The Locked On NBA Big Board Draft experts plus the Odyssey insiders. First pick is June 16th. Search the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and follow, so now you don't miss a pick. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And got my guy, John Harris, filling in. We're talking about some receivers. And now let's get into that 2020 class, because there are some big-time names there. Or, I won't even say big time. There definitely are big times, especially as it pertains to Justin Jefferson. But some of these other guys are definitely talented, and teams will have to try to figure out, what do we do? Do we pay this guy? Because if he walks and goes somewhere else, we saw what really messed up the market, and it was Christian Kirk, right? Yeah. And I think there are a lot of guys here that definitely have either Christian Kirk type production or even more. They've surpassed him, and the team is going to be like, man, we got to pay him $19 million a year. So one guy that comes to mind immediately, and I want to get your opinion on how this team is going to handle the situation. Cincinnati Bengals with T. Higgins. They drafted T. Higgins at the top of the second round, and in the very next year, they drafted receiver Jamar Chase in the top 5. All right, so obviously we've seen what Jamar Chase has done, and he has been spectacular. But T. Higgins has been pretty darn good himself. Yes, this is a guy who really would have went over 1,000 yards as a rookie if not for an injury in that Week 17 game. And then he followed that up with last season going over 1,000 yards and really being a pivotal playmaker. Had a big-time touchdown catch in the Super Bowl. So this is a guy who has become everything that they wanted him to be. But what do you do when you already have Jamar Chase? And he's probably going to be the highest-paid non-quarterback in the league when it's time for his contract. T. Higgins, Bengals, do they re-sign him?
They can't. I mean, I don't mean it to say that. In our discussion, I mean, they can. And I'll give this to the Bengals. The Bengals have changed their philosophy a little bit. The Bengals were always as frugal as it got. And it always felt like the Bengals were preparing a player to graduate. Kind of the theory. It was like, you're not going to take a team-friendly deal. We got to move on. But they've paid some guys. In fact, they paid DJ Reader, which I hated because we lost him with the Texans. But they paid DJ Reader. They're going to have to pay Jesse Bates. But they've been paying guys. They paid Trey Hendrickson to come along. They could ultimately pay T. Higgins, but you got to know that the following year, Jamar Chase is – I think the question becomes, Eric, where's Jamar Chase right now after year one in the league? I think he's a top 3, top 4 receiver in this league already. At that point, if I've got a guy of that ilk, I probably am going to pay a little bit above market value to keep that guy. He's of that caliber. I'm going to pay him. T. Higgins is really, really good. I think the Bengals are not going to be able to afford to pay him because he'll need a contract the year before Chase. Well, if they sign Higgins and then all of a sudden they sign Chase to this big, massive deal, oh, by the way, the QB's got to get paid too in Joe Burrow. I think T. Higgins is going to be in a spot where he's available to teams that need a wide receiver. And, there might be some teams. That was going to be my next question. There might be some teams down on the Gulf Coast that, I don't know, maybe could use a guy like T. Higgins. Look, we saw that guy. I saw him as a rookie up close and personal. Eric, they came here, and Brandon Allen was throwing the football that day. He went nuts against us. I mean, he went crazy. And my buddy Andre Ware, who does our analysis, just kept talking about T. Higgins, and man, T. Higgins is the guy. And then all of a sudden you had Jamar Chase, and you could see why the Bengals passing game went to a different level. I just think T. Higgins is going to be that guy that is phased out, if you will. And there are going to be some teams looking for a wide receiver, and he's going to end up getting paid. And you brought up Christian Kirk. I think because it was Jacksonville, they had to pay a premium to even get in the conversation with Christian Kirk. I don't think offered the same money as, Kansas City and Jacksonville, say they offered the same contract, I don't think Christian Kirk is going to end up picking Jacksonville. But because the money was that much higher than everywhere else, Christian Kirk picks Jacksonville. And there's certain teams that have to pay that premium. And there might be a team that has to pay that premium on T. Higgins, but it's going to pay off. It's absolutely going to pay off for them because I think T. Higgins can evolve into a number one somewhere. It's just not going to happen in Cincinnati. So I think it's a great one to look at. And the guy right behind him, I'll ask you, Eric, Michael Pittman Jr. with the Colts. I know that place. I know it pretty well. They pay their guys that they draft and they develop, they like to pay. But are they going to be able to do that for Michael Pittman after paying Quentin Nelson, after paying Darius Leonard, after paying the guys that they have drafted and developed, Braden Smith, who they signed to a second contract last year? Are they going to be able to afford a guy like Michael Pittman? And they drafted Alec Pierce this past year.
Right, and I think maybe some of it has to do with how well does Alec Pierce play as a rookie? Does he give you enough to where you're like, you know what, with Michael Pittman, we just let him play out this contract and then see what happens from there. This is a receiver that just went over 1,000 yards and had 6 touchdowns with Carson Wentz at quarterback. I would look for him to take just another step up with Matt Ryan, being able to play with that type of veteran who's going to be able to really feed him the game and kind of dive into the mind of a Julio Jones and what Julio Jones brought to that offense, how he worked, how he prepared, and how he set up defensive backs. And there was one thing that I heard that was very interesting with what Matt Ryan did getting there. He basically scouted all of his weapons. He watched tons of their film, scouted the players, got their strengths, their weaknesses, and I think that's going to help them find areas where, hey, you can improve by doing X, Y, Z, and that might help a guy like Michael Pittman Jr. take his game to the next level. I definitely wanted to ask about him. And another receiver, too, I'm curious to see how this plays out with Chase Claypool. This is a guy who, is playing there with Pittsburgh. They have Deontay Johnson. What do they do with him? That's a 2019 guy that they're going to have to make a decision on fairly soon. He's going into this offseason without a contract, and we didn't even really touch on some of the other guys like DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, some of these guys that really want that contract didn't even show up to OTAs, that mandatory minicamp. All right, but, Deontay Johnson, got to throw him in that loop. What happens with him? And then not only what happens with him, there's going to be this snowball effect because then you have Chase Claypool. Then they also just drafted 2 more receivers in George Pickens and Calvin Austin. So Chase Claypool, is this a guy that will be a kind of a casualty to this new kind of wave of receivers and how teams are going about the position?
That's my gut. That's what it says. I mean, Chase Claypool, I think it was just yesterday, Eric, I saw him. It ended up on some graphic on Twitter that I saw. And it said, I'm a top 3 wide receiver in the league. I mean, kind of like, okay. I love the confidence and I love the belief in himself. But that said, he's not a number 3 receiver in the league. And I don't want to say he's number 3 with his own team, but if George Pickens is everything we think he could be, then he might be number 3 on his own team because Deontay Johnson is a tremendous weapon. Now, Pittsburgh's got a little bit of a curveball because Kenny Pickett going to be that guy? Who's throwing him the football? Najee Harris, I would imagine they're going to put some money in at some point when his contract comes up in a couple of years. So I think Chase Claypool will end up being another one of those casualties for that particular reason, because if he thinks he's going to end up getting I don't want to say Tyreek money or Devontae money, he is sadly mistaken because you're talking Tyreek and Devontae. If he's the 3rd receiver in the league, then those 2 are 1 and 2. And I don't think he's in that caliber, but that's the kind of contract you're talking. And I can't see the Pittsburgh Steelers, even though they're now starting to do some things a little bit different with their contracts, I can't see them saying, yep, Chase Claypool, you're our guy. I can't see that. I can see them going Deontay Johnson, and we're going to try and make this work with George Pickens. And Calvin Austin is, I don't want to say different, but he's more a slot guy, so I think he fits into a different category. But I think he's going to work out for them. If they figure it out with Kenny Pickett, I think ultimately they could go with Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and Calvin Austin. And that's a pretty dangerous threesome. Let Claypool graduate and move on and go sign with some other team.
Deontay Johnson, over 100 receptions last year, also had over 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns. A big drop-off from Chase Claypool. with his touchdown production. Went from 9 touchdowns receiving as a rookie with another 2 touchdowns rushing to only 2 total touchdowns in his sophomore season. So numbers kind of going down. We'll see if there's a trend that continues there. And we want to dive into some of these young guys coming up. Some of the next wave of guys that are going to kind of force some of these teams' hands. We're going to talk about that and more coming up. But first, we want to talk to you a little bit about the good folks over at Built Bar and how they have the new mud pie. And you know, our friends over at Built, they're always coming out with new amazing flavors. Well, this time they made one that was truly remarkable, and it's the new mud pie flavor. And for the first time ever, Built is introducing the new mud pie flavor in both mud pie bar and puff. So, you know, I love my puffs. Other guys like the bars more. I just like the marshmallow in there. And either one of them, they are going to taste amazing. We got a chance to taste both of them before they put them out on the market. And I thought both were amazing. My daughter, we both kind of split them in half. We had the Built Bar Puff and we had the bar. We split it in half, so we both tried each one. She definitely loved the puff and she loved the bar as well. These are bars that have 150 calories, 8 grams of sugar, and it's like your mom baked the most delicious creamy chocolate mud pie and wrapped it up just for you. Mud pie bars and puffs are available at Built.com right now, but like all Built bars, they are going fast. Sometimes you do not know when they're going to get that flavor back. They are covered in 100% real chocolate, and that means that they are healthy and tasty as well. You're going to love the new mud pie Built bar and the Built Puff as well. Whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or you just want to grab a quick bite, Built is the perfect bar for you. These will be on hand for myself. We're taking our family to Disneyland next week, and you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to have a bunch of Built bars in those bags. So when the kids want a snack, here's your Built bar. Eat that right now, and then we'll worry about dinner a little bit later, all right? Chocolate mousse, whipped cream cookies, and cream crumble. Stop drooling. Go to Built.com right now and get your mud pie bar and your puffs as well. You won't regret it. Go to Built.com right now. Use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off of your order. Again, use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, John, let's talk a little bit about some of these prospects in the 2023 class. Jordan Addison, he transferred from Pittsburgh to USC. Jackson Smith-Njigba at Ohio State. You got Booty from LSU. And Cedric Tillman, big receiver at Tennessee. All right, these are guys that are going to be trying to push some of these 2020 class guys for a spot. Hey, you know what? Your team sees me. They see what I'm doing, and they're going to get you out of there. Smith-Njigba and Addison, these are guys that are kind of primed to be potentially top 10 picks. So do you see teams electing to maybe not re-sign some of these 2020 guys and really kind of let's go towards a little younger rookie contract type guy?
Yeah, I absolutely could. And I think this class, just like the others, those names you mentioned, people may be hearing them for the first time. Maybe not Jackson Smith-Njigba if they watched the Rose Bowl. He was fantastic. He was just incredible. Now, I will say, because I've heard a lot of this, man, Utah's such a good defense. Look what he did. Utah was playing with a running back at corner. And listen, my man Eric Crocker, you know how difficult it is to play corner. How difficult is it for a running back to play corner? It's rhetorical. You don't have to answer that because I know you know. But Jackson Smith-Njigba went large in that game. And it's funny because I was at the Combine, and we were checking out of our hotel. And as we were checking out of our hotel, because the NCAA was right across the street from our hotel, and there was some sort of symposium that was going on the same weekend as the Combine. And so these 4 guys are standing near me. And, I mean, I'm no dummy. I look over, and I can see that they're all wearing scarlet and gray. And I look, and I'm like, that's C.J. Stroud. And that's Paris Johnson, 2 highly ranked prospects. And I go, that's Jackson Smith-Njigba. And what stood out to me was, well, he's not a tall guy. He's only 6 foot. And I would imagine as I looked at him, I'm right at 6 foot. And I felt like I was looking down a little bit to him. So he might end up measuring like 5'11"-ish. Yeah. But he's 200 pounds, which kind of gives you the build. And this is the one thing that stood out was his build. He's built kind of like Deebo Samuel. I think that Jackson Smith-Njigba isn't quite, Deebo turned into a runner and what he could do. I think Smith-Njigba does a lot of different things for an Ohio State team. he's not going to be a runner. But, man, after the catch, he's phenomenal. Kayshon Boutte, who didn't play at LSU much last year because of an injury, he's like Njigba. He's probably a little bit less thick. But, man, you talk about deep downfield threat, guy that can go get it in one-on-one situations. He's going to be able to roast people. So I'm curious how LSU is able to utilize that, who plays quarterback for them, whether it's Jaden Daniels coming over for Arizona State or it's somebody else. And then there's Jordan Addison. And the name that I keep coming back to Jordan Addison is Stephon Diggs. Just size-wise, just how they move. He makes it look smooth and easy, and I always felt that way with Stephon Diggs. But Addison's light. I mean, he's almost 172, 173 pounds. But we've seen a lot of lithe wide receivers come into the game. So I don't know if that's going to be an issue at all for him. But going out to USC, seeing how he handles that, playing with Caleb Williams out at USC, that's going to be kind of interesting how he's able to do that. Kenny Pickett made him look pretty good. And Addison's a good receiver. We'll see how Caleb Williams adapts to it. And the guy that you mentioned, Cedric Tillman from out of Tennessee, is a guy, and maybe a lot of people are paying attention to. But I was studying Velus Jones this past offseason, and I'm like, who's number 4? I was like, is he coming out in the draft? And I mean, we do that when we're looking, for the draft. You see a guy and you're like, hey, is that guy? Oh no, he's a true freshman, or he's this, he's that. And I'm like, Cedric Tillman, is he coming out in the draft? Nope, he's going back. 6'3", 215 pounds, true and total deep threat. I think Cedric Tillman could end up being a name a lot of people may not know now. When the season's over, they look up and go, man, Cedric Tillman, that's a guy I want to keep an eye on. Josh Palmer, Velus Jones, we saw those guys go in second, third round, and they were way off the radar for a lot of people. I think Cedric Tillman should be on teams' radar screens because of that deep threat ability. Cedric Tillman has definitely got to watch. Those receivers, and it feels like there's more. I love a guy at Virginia, Eric. His name is Datavion Wicks. And I was actually watching their quarterback, Brennan Armstrong, lefty, who I like. I'm like, man, number 3 is a stud. Who is this? And I look up, and it's Datavion Wicks. He's going into his fourth year. And just everything you want a receiver. After the catch, big, 6'1", 206. He's one of the bigger receivers in this class. And Virginia keeps finding different ways to move the ball and do different things. But when they need a catch, and they need a big play, they went to Wicks. Wicks is a fun guy to watch. It's a fun offense to watch, especially with Brennan Armstrong still there and Kaytion Thompson, who's moved over from Mississippi State. Virginia needs to be a team that a lot of people should watch this year in 2022 and keep an eye on Wicks. I think he could be a sneaky hot name once we get to draft time in 2023.
You talked about Cedric Tillman and his big play ability. A couple of his best games this past season against Georgia, number 1 team in the nation, and Alabama. All right, we're talking about against Georgia, which we know how good their defense is.
Yep.
He had 10 receptions, 200 yards, and a touchdown to go with that.
Yep.
Our 53-yard play was his longest of that game. Alabama, 7 receptions, 152 yards, and another touchdown. And then, to cap off everything, in which I thought, okay, this guy's going to the NFL, what he did in the bowl game.
Yeah.
Against Purdue, Boilermakers. Yep. 7 receptions, 150 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So Cedric Tillman, definitely a guy who people don't know a whole lot about yet. But once these games start, you start seeing this guy outrunning guys, stretching the field, big body receiver. He's going to start being on a lot of teams' radars, even as a first-round pick. Really exciting to see what happens with all of this. Again, we're trying to dive into the minds of these NFL and see if we can kind of predict what they continue to do moving forward with these receivers as they start to get paid more and more money. I'm pretty sure this won't be the last time that we have this conversation about it. We're out of time here, but we want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, you got Locked On 49ers with myself, Brian Peacock. You got Locked On Chiefs with my co-host, Ryan Tracy. And you got John Harris. Everything John Harris is doing, not so much on the Locked On Network, but he got footballtakeover.com. You can follow him on Twitter as well. J Harris Football, right? On Twitter.
There it is, J Harris Football. You got it.
Crocker. That was off the top of my dome, too. There we go. Good memory for a good person to follow on social media. But that's going to do it for this episode. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Peace.